Hello everyone, I am the Bandit Kirby, and welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a commander from the Duskmourn Precon's Rendmaw, Creaking Nest. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel and no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You can also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with a logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or you can always just support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Rendmaw is a 5/5 artifact creature scarecrow with menace and reach for 3 generic, 1 black and 1 green. Whenever it enters and whenever you play a card with 2 or more card types, each player creates a tapped black 2/2 flyer that are goaded for the rest of the game. Them entering tapped is amazing because opponents won't be able to ever block with them unless they untap them via other methods. So they'll always be attacking each other with goaded birds. If they don't have any other flyers or creatures with reach, the damage will add up quickly, especially since the deck is designed to make the most of Rendmaw's trigger. Rendmaw having reach is also helpful for when it's down to just us and our final opponent, since goad doesn't work when it's 1v1. In order to try and kill off as many opponents as possible, or at the very least kill off the last 2 opponents in a single alpha strike, the deck aims to boost our creatures with plenty of boons and buffs. It's running Archetype of Endurance, Archetype of Finality, Bow of Nylea, Destiny Spinner, Eldrazi Conscription, Nylea God of the Hunt, Nylea's Colossus, Renata Call to the Hunt, and Weaver of Harmony. Notice that all of these cards are enchantments with the second card type, whether artifact, creature, or kindred. That means that casting these will trigger Rendmaw as well as providing us value. Archetype of Endurance giving all of our creatures hexproof as well as depriving our opponent's creatures of it is super useful, especially if we want to kill off any key creatures while protecting our own. Archetype of Finality pairs amazingly with Bow of Nylea. First strike with Death Touch essentially means all of our creatures survive each combat regardless of size, since they'll hit first and it'll always be lethal. The archetype also removes Death Touch from our opponent's creatures, which is also helpful. That being said, the bow is amazing here because it also has a Swiss Army knife activated ability in which all options are useful. Destiny Spinner makes our creature and enchantment spells uncounterable, which is great because that's over half of our deck. Not only that, but we can also animate lands, which can help with closing out games when aggroing out. Speaking of closing out games, Eldrazi Conscription is insane. Sure, the defending player can just sacrifice their goaded burst to Annihilator, but that's beside the point. At the very least, it'll be less creatures coming our way later, but for now, it makes our commander a 2-turn clock. Nylea gives all of our creatures trampled, but is amazing itself as a creature, being a 6/6 with indestructible. Not only that, but we can sink our mana to make a creature bigger, helping us break through. It's odd that she doesn't have reach considering she's a towering god with a bow and arrow, but I digress. Nylea's Colossus is another way to pump creatures, doubling its power and toughness whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield. With the amount of enchantments in this deck, this can get out of hand very quickly, especially if we play more than one per turn. We could just apply the effect to the same creature if we know it can get through. It's also a 6/6 itself, which is nothing to scoff at. Renata is also a huge beater if we have a high devotion to green. This will more than likely be the case, but at the very least, all of our creatures enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter, making them bigger. At the very least, our bird tokens, which will thus be larger than our opponents. Weaver of Harmony is also a pump effect, but it's static and only for our other enchantment creatures. But that's fine because the deck has a ton of them. However, it's also useful because you can pay 1 green and tap it to copy an activated or triggered ability of one of our enchantments. So make sure you pay attention to any good triggers that are happening on your board. Last but not least is Coat of Arms. This won't trigger Rendmaw, but it's too good not to run here. Since the effect is symmetrical, it also boosts our opponent's birds. Since each play gets a bird per turn, that's an extra +3/+3 to each bird per trigger. That's nothing to scoff at. This will make opponents kill each other faster. Granted, once they die, their birds leave and the boom will decrease, but we'll just keep creating more and more birds. Just make sure you avoid playing this against a typal commander. We can also aggro out with other types of tokens thanks to Bitter Blossom, Kozilek's Command, Tarmogoyf Nest, and Errata of the Endless Web. Again, notice how each of these cards have 2 types. The enchantments provide obvious synergy with the deck since there is a focus on enchantments. That being said, Kozilek's Command being an instant can provide us a ton of chump blockers in a pinch, or let us dig deep through the deck for a single card via the Scry, or maybe get rid of something. It's a good modal spell and all we need are colorless mana sources, which we'll soon see. The Nest won't provide us insanely sized Tarmogoyf tokens, but they'll be big enough. Arasta is already an amazing card, but it's much better here since it'll trigger Rendmaw for those birds. Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, and Primal Vigor are obviously included since we're always trying to create tokens. While Primal Vigor might seem bad to play against other token decks, in this case it's amazing since it'll also double the amount of bird tokens Rendmaw gives our opponents, making it even faster for them to kill each other. Keep that in mind. We can also make the most of Rendmaw even while interacting with opponents. To that end, the deck is running Hey Might, Lignify, Blight's Ending, Root Grapple, Meteor Golem, and Steel Hellkite. Again, notice how all of these cards have 2 card types for that bird production. Of note is Steel Hellkite, especially in the endgame. If it manages to get through, we can just pay 0 to X to get rid of all of the defending player's bird tokens when it's down to 1v1. We can also just use it to destroy other things, but helping balance out the gifts when it's no longer to our benefit is definitely the way to go. The deck is still running tried and true interaction like Assassin's Trophy, Warping Whale, and Beast Within for single targets, Casualties of War for multiple single targets, and In Garruk's Wake and Plague Wind for board wipes. Not to say that the previous interaction pieces are bad, they're still good on their own, but you can't go wrong with including these. Especially the last two, near the endgame, these are almost practically guaranteeing our victory. Thought Render Lamia is another synergistic piece of disruption. Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is getting rid of it before it can even become one. With the amount of enchantments in the deck, this will trigger more often than not. However, the deck is also running Mind Slash to make the most of our bird tokens. We have practically unlimited fodder for this thing. We don't have to use it all the time, but seeing an opponent's hand every now and again is never a bad thing, especially when we can remove the best card there while we're at it. Attrition also does something similar but against opponents' non-black creatures. This means we can't trade bird for bird since they're black, but we can still trade birds for their best non-black creatures, so it's still an amazing interaction effect here. We can also protect against opponents' own interaction with Eldritch Immunity and Cloak and Dagger. Again, notice that these cards have 2 types. The immunity is great not only as spot removal, but when overloaded can help with mass burn effects like Blasphemous Act. The equipment won't equip for free in the deck, but getting a Rendmaw trigger to then be able to give it Shroud is still good, even if we have to pay it to cast it and equip it. Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Champion's Helm are still included, which are obviously better, but Cloak and Dagger are still good enough to include without feeling like you're sacrificing a slot. Heroic Intervention, Golgari Charm, and Rapid Vigor round out the protection, and they're pretty much required in a tokens deck like this one. Very few board wipes have the can't be regenerated clause, so Golgari Charm and Rapid Vigor do epic work to protect our creatures from mass destruction. Hell's Caretaker is another sacrifice outlet to make the most of our birds, but we can use it to trade being lonely 2/2 tokens and our best creature in the graveyard. So even if we couldn't protect that creature, we still have a way to recover it. And straight to the battlefield. Just keep in mind that since we're reanimating it and not playing it, any 2-typed creature will not trigger Rendmaw when entering the battlefield this way. Even card advantage and mana acceleration can be applied to the deck's main strategy. Cards like Eidolon of Blossoms, Erebos Bleakhearted, and Erebos God of the Dead will trigger Rendmaw, but are also amazing on their own anyways. The Eidolon will trigger way more often than not, which is why it being 2 types is such a huge bonus. With how aggressive the deck is, along with the sacrifice effects, both styles of Erebos will also trigger more often than not. If nothing else, then once we have the Devotion, they're huge indestructible beaters too. Dark Prophecy, Morbid Opportunist, Species Specialist, Moldervine Reclamation, and Liliana Dreadhorde General make the most of these effects as well, even though they don't trigger Rendmaw. Being able to draw a card each time a creature dies is nothing to scoff at. Even more so when combined with the previously shown sacrifice outlets. Obviously, we choose Bird with Species Specialist since it doesn't care who controlled it when it died, so it will trigger off of opponent's birds dying. Same with Morbid Opportunist. These cards are amazing here, especially Liliana since we can also create even more tokens. Forcing all players to sacrifice 2 creatures might simply incentivize opponents to get rid of their birds, but that's good when it's down to 1v1. Ayara First of Loch Twain is another way to turn our blackbirds into card advantage. All we need to do is tap her and sacrifice one. That being said, she also drains the table for 1 life whenever black creatures enter our battlefield. So she's amazing in more ways than one here, accelerating the death by 1,000 cuts. Speaking of accelerating, Sanctum Weaver, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Nylea Keen-Eyed, Scampering Surveyor, Solemn Simulacrum, Overlord of the Hauntwoods, and Nyxbloom Ancient help move the deck along. I know I've been saying this quite often, but I do because it matters. Again, notice how all these cards have 2 card types. What can I say? Rendmaw loves them. Sanctum Weaver and Nyxbloom Ancient give massive bursts of mana, especially the Mana Dork since it has the potential of tapping down for a ton of mana. The Ancient just makes it so that every permanent we tap for mana will tap for triple that mana instead. Beware that this excludes any Eldrazi spawn tokens since they don't need to be tapped when sacrificed, so keep that in mind. The Dryad lets us play an additional land per turn, which is great once we're drawing into a ton of cards. It also has our lands tapped for any color, which helps us fix our colors, if we have too many colorless land sources. But since the deck has a handful of colorless mana pips, we still need them. Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth and Yavimaya Cradle of Growth are still included just in case for the same reason, especially since they don't take up slots in the deck. But you'll see what I mean with the lands soon enough. This version of Nylea makes our creature spells cost 1 less to cast, which is one of the best ways to accelerate our mana. Not only that, but we have the potential of getting the top card of our library into our hand if it's a creature. Oh, and she's an indestructible 5/6 when devotion is met. The golems ramp us for basic lands when they enter. If played before our commander, they help us get it faster, but when played afterwards, we get a land and a bird, so they're great whenever we play them. The Overlord also gets us a land when it enters, but it creates it instead of fetching for it. Keep in mind that even if we cast it for its impending cost, it's still an enchantment creature on the stack, so it will trigger Rendmaw. And then we also get an Everywhere token whenever it attacks, making it even better. Farseek, Nature's Lore, 3 Visits into the North, and Rampant Growth are still included in the deck because they cost only 2 mana to play and can get us dual-typed lands. Regardless of how good the previous cards are, we still need our tried and true 2 CMC mana acceleration package. Same with Sol Ring. Good old Sol Ring, helping us get 2 turns ahead since the inception of the format. Speaking of mana rocks, the Golden Throne is an interesting but amazing inclusion in the deck. Not only can it turn black birds into better black lotuses, but its first ability is also amazing. When it's down to 1v1, gold is moot. If we ended up kin making too hard our final opponent, we can still survive 1 Alpha Strike, giving us a chance to get them back in our next turn, hopefully taking them out with our own Alpha Strike. Last but not least are the lands. With the way Rendmaw is worded, even lands will trigger it since we play lands. If it was just cast, it wouldn't work, but since it's playing, we can run all the 2-type lands. Artifact lands like Dark Moss Bridge, Darksteel Citadel, Power Depot, Scene of the Crime, Treasure Vault, Tree of Tales, and Vault of Whispers, enchantment lands like Urza Saga and Valgavoth Slayer, and creature lands like Dryad Arbor. While these might seem like weak inclusions, I disagree. You're getting a free 2/2 flyer just for playing a land. That, and you're giving your opponents even more goated blackbirds to smack each other with. Even if the only artifact you can get with Urza Saga is Sol Ring. Now that we're here, let's just see the rest of the lands in the deck. The deck's running all 7 fetch lands: Haunted Mire, Overgrown Tomb, Underground Mortuary, Woodland Chasm, Deathclap Glade, Undergrowth Stadium, Command Tower, and Ancient Tomb, as well as 3 of each snow-covered basic land and 1 snow-covered waste, just to be able to fetch for a colorless land source for those strictly colorless spells, and for Into the North. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This view is just an idea of how to build around Rendmaw Creaking Nest. While the black-green color identity doesn't have much in the ways of making the most of forced combat or goad, our commander creating those birds is still good enough because we can make the best of them in other ways. Opponents are still hitting each other, but we'll have sacrifice fodder, ways to make the most of death triggers, and then ways to pump our board and kill off opponents, particularly when it comes down to 1v1. Let me know in the comments how you would build around Rendmaw. If you're interested in the decklist of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members. Your membership is greatly appreciated. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Commander Kirby, and happy brewing.